be reused in relation to the website of the global working group for people who were not able to attend. We have received a very long list of questions. We have shared those questions with all the presenters, so hopefully some of the presentations will be able to address some of the questions. I think we received close to 100 or even more questions, which shows great interest in what we are talking about. But of course, I guess we'll not be able to cover in any detail the questions. Now, if you have questions for the presentations, could you please mute your microphone? There's some noise on the line. If you have questions during the presentations, you can use the chat. And if you would, in the two very short question and answer sessions we have, you want to take the floor, please raise your hand and we will give you the floor. Now, let me start with the introduction. I guess that you can, all of you, see the slides here. So what I will say in the outset is something about the task team on big data and the SDGs. So as I said, we are very happy that so many have taken interest in this side event. The Global Working Group on Big Data has been around since 2014 and has been working on the use of different data sources in relation to the production of official statistics. So there will be task teams on Earth observation data and mobile phone data and scanner data and a lot of other data sources. And you can find everything you want to know about this on the website of the Global Working Group. We also have this task team on the SDGs and big data. It's kind of cross-cutting, as mentioned here. The main objective is to provide examples of potential non-traditional data that are used to cover and monitor the SDGs. And we would very much like to take a country focus. We are in the business of trying to improve. Could you please mute? Thank you. We are in the business of trying to strengthen the capabilities of NSOs in relation to the SDG data challenge. That's what we're here for. What we are working on is to make an inventory of past and ongoing research on big data and the SDGs. We are working at setting up a number of pilot research things in a few countries to focus specifically on specific SDG indicators to use non-traditional data to cover those. And we would very much like to have all the help we can get and assistance in relation to methodology in this, and also to develop guidelines for the cases that we have been working on. And if you can show the next slide, please. Now, if you look into it, there is a lot of work going on in relation to SDGs and new data sources. But not a lot of that is actually used or related to specific activities in specific countries. There are projects that are very kind of promising, but again, at the end of the day, we need to employ this into the work of the national statistical organizations on this. Therefore, there are different approaches to it that we would like to integrate in what we're doing. There are a number of examples of initiatives mentioned here, Indonesia and Colombia. But the overall purpose of the event is to inform you where we are based on my presentations here and the discussions that we will have, and the country presentations and the agency presentations. I will very much encourage you to visit the website of the Global Working Group to get an insight into what we're doing. And I would also very much encourage you to consider joining the different task teams of the Global Working Group, including, of course, the task team on big data and the SDGs. The more parties we can include, including the more countries we can include in our work, I think the better we will be able to fulfill our ambitions on supporting big data and the SDGs. Okay, so much for my introduction, and then we will move on to the first country presentation, and that will be from the Philippines. So please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Neil. Distinguished colleagues in the global statistical system, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. In addressing the increasing demand for data in the different socioeconomic indicators, mainly to achieve the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the statistical community is attempting to shift its focus on non-traditional data sources in the recent years. In our case, here in the Philippines, even though big data is still in the developmental stage, there have been various efforts to utilize big data in support of official statistics since 2016. This presentation aims to showcase these efforts and to share with you our experiences in using big data to monitor the Sustainable Development Goals. The use of citizens-generated data to address data gaps related to monitoring the SDGs is a project of the Philippines in partnership with Paris 21. The citizens-generated data are data produced by non-state actors under the active consent of citizens to explicitly tackle social issues. Although the use of citizens-generated data for official reporting is still in the infancy stage, even at the international level, there is a keen interest in our country to explore its use to address the existing data gaps in monitoring the SDGs. The process started with a review of the SDG indicators to assess whether the identified data gaps could be potentially addressed by data generated from this organization, the citizens-generated data. The Philippine Statistics Authority then developed a tool in the questionnaire format to review and evaluate the data collected by civil society organizations and how they are currently being processed and used. The inventory and the conduct of the survey on the civil society organization data holdings yielded a total of 53 accomplished questionnaires out of the 80 that participated. After that, a series of consultations with civil society organizations and non-government organizations, launching workshop and a dissemination forum were also organized for the study. These activities provided an opportunity to advance a collaborative environment between the Philippine Statistics Authority and the civil society organizations. Likewise, a task force was established to identify citizens-generated data as possible data source for official reporting and to develop a harmonized data ecosystem in collaboration with the different stakeholders to establish a framework of data sharing, exchange of good practices on citizens-generated data, among others. This task force was comprised by the Philippine Statistics Authority, the civil society organization, non-government organizations, and representatives from the academe and international organization. A proposed rating scale to determine the quality of the citizens-generated data was also formulated. A scale is an attempt to replicate the elements or criteria used in the United Nations National Quality Assurance Framework Manual, the OECD Quality Framework, and guidelines for OECD statistical activities and how this can be applied in the Philippine setting. We identified 5 dimensions in the proposal. The first one is relevance of the data. Second is credibility, timeliness and frequency, method, and accessibility. The results showed that 81 SDG indicators in our country have potential to be supported by citizens-generated data and civil society organizations' data holdings. Of these 81 indicators, 36 are Tier 1, 24 are Tier 2, and 21 are Tier 3. So this is our experience related to citizens-generated data. The next project in our country dealt with the computation of the Rural Access Index, or the RAI, a tier T indicator in the Philippines. This relates with SDG 9.1.1, or the proportion of rural population who live within 2 kilometers of an all-season road. In coming up with this indicator, the Philippine Statistics Authority measured the Rural Access Index using geospatial data. The methodology followed the initial work of the World Bank, which required the following: a gridded population distribution maps, administrative boundary maps with urban and rural classification, and a road network maps. In addition, the Rural Access Index was also compared to other established socioeconomic indicators in the National Demographic and Health Survey and the Gross Regional Domestic Product. Since the initial methodology only considered horizontal distance, the index are still being refined by considering the effects of elevation and presence of water surface. However, the said Rural Access Index already provides insights about rural communities in our country. Correlation between the Rural Access Index and the social and economic indicators also emerge. The third effort in the Philippines is utilizing big data, was the enhancement of our small area poverty estimates by incorporating nighttime lights from satellite images. This is done in partnership with the Philippine Statistics Authority and the Asian Development Bank. Three inputs here were needed in this particular project. The first one is the daytime satellite imagery. The second is the data on night lights, and of course, our poverty statistics. The initial results of the study showed that the machine learning process predictions had some degree of consistency with that of our official poverty estimates in the country. However, there are some problems on the extreme values. They are not as accurate, or the areas with high levels of poverty tended to be underestimated using the machine learning model. So these are still under further enhancement to preserve the distributional structure of the grid level poverty prediction, but still pays heed to the official poverty estimates at the more aggregated level, meeting the primary objective to provide more granular estimates of poverty. And finally, the last endeavor that I'd like to share with you in our country is using big data for monitoring SDG in collaboration with another agency in the country, the Advanced Science and Technology Institute of our Department of Science and Technology, on the use of artificial intelligence for the census of agriculture and fisheries. This is an ongoing project which aims to apply artificial intelligence techniques and technologies such as remote sensing and Earth observation data for the conduct of our 2022 Census of Agriculture and Fisheries. For this project, the Philippine Statistics Authority will be provided access to satellite images, high-performance computing, and cloud facilities, and also training with the aforementioned artificial intelligence technologies and technical consultants. In addition to the trainings already done, prediction models and ground truthing activities have been done in 2020 for 3 of the 15 areas that is our target of interest. In 2021, this year, phase 2 of the project is scheduled for the pre-operation and calibration activities, which will involve continuing development of other prediction models, ground truthing, and capacity building for the other applications in time for the conduct of the 2022 Census of Agriculture and Fisheries. The data to be gathered during the census will also be used to monitor agriculture-related SDGs. These 4 projects that I mentioned are the current efforts of the Philippines in harnessing the huge potential of big data in support of SDG monitoring. More work, of course, is needed to fully maximize this massive data source, including coming up with a legal framework to get access to data from private companies, such as social media websites and telecommunication services. But given this optimistic outlook, our country will continue to pursue more big data projects to support not only the SDG monitoring, but ultimately to achieve our 2030 agenda. Thank you very much for your attention. That's all, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. I'm sure that there will be a number of questions and reflections based on that. But before we come to that, I will do my presentation on the situation in Denmark in relation to the big data and the SDGs. So the question that we have been posed is how much non-traditional data is used for the follow-up in relation to the SDGs. And as I'm sure and a number of you know, in Denmark we have a statistical production system that is for most parts based on information from admin data and admin sources. So in that sense, for us, admin data is traditional data. And therefore, if we go outside, I will return to that in a minute, the point about the admin data, but if we go outside of that, then the answer to the question is that we are not covering basically anything in relation to the SDGs based on new data sources, like for instance, big data. So we have also had a look into the access to an all-season road issue in relation to Earth observation data, but for the most part of what we're doing, this is covered by the admin data, and we can do that because we have a fully fledged and fully developed system with unique identifiers for people in the population register, for businesses in the business register, and for dwellings in the housing register. So that is actually how we covered the majority of the requirements for the SDG targets and indicators. It works in most parts quite well for us. There are also challenges, for instance, challenges in relation to specific groups in the population that are related to the SDGs, as for instance, people with disabilities. We have a challenge in relation to that. This is not to say that we don't have any experience in the use of big data, because we do have that. Denmark has been active in the Global Working Group task team on scanner data for the CPI, and we now have a production system where we base a big part of the input for the CPI on scanner data from different parts of the economy. We do also have experiments with the AIS data, the shipping position data, and actually also with smart meter data on electricity consumption. Before the COVID-19 situation, we covered part of our harbor statistics based on AIS data, and we have developed that in a setup of experimental statistics that we developed as a response to the requests for more timely data in relation to the COVID-19. So we have actually been able to make a weekly indicator of harbor activities in Denmark based on AIS data, and were among some of the first that were able to see that there seemed to be no major influence on the COVID-19 situation on the harbor activity, which has later been supported by more traditional statistical sources in relation to how Danish production companies and industry has fared during the COVID-19, which is quite well, actually. And then we have access to smart meter data on electricity consumption. And one of the questions that are in the chat from Gabriel is if we can combine those new data sources with the existing data sources based on admin data that we have and what is the take on that in relation to those who are delivering the access to those new data sources for us. And we have actually combined the smart meter data for electricity consumption with the dwelling register, so that we are now able to give a statistical presentation on electricity consumption on each and every dwelling in Denmark, both those who are used for housing, but also those who are used for public services and production. And again, that is one of the things that we have done during the COVID-19 situation, so that we could show the electricity use in the service sector, which went dramatically down, but also in parts of the public service sector, including kindergartens and schools and universities, but also in the dwellings that are used for industrial production, where it did not go down. So we have gained some experience during the COVID-19 situation to both get access to data and to combine big data sources with what is for us traditional data sources like the admin data. And this leads me to my second to last point, namely the access to big data, which is a challenge for us. And I think it's one of the major challenges for statistical organizations who want to use those privately generated or privately held data for the production, that we still have a legal issue in relation to the access and use of the data for statistics. But I'm sure that we are not the only country that have had positive experiences during the COVID-19 situation in relation to this. And hopefully we will, as a community of statisticians, be able to continue those positive experiences also in the future in relation to a more maybe normalized statistical production. In the task team, we also, as the last presentation so well showed, discussing how to include citizen-generated data in the monitoring of the SDGs. We would very much like to do that. We actually have now kind of rephrased the purpose of our work to include basically all kind of new data sources that can be used either for the SDG indicators or for supplementary indicators, so that if we can come up with data that can give some kind of a supplement to the officially defined indicators, we are also open for that, which is also kind of an invitation to everybody to join the work. The more data we can get around a specific indicator and topic, and the better the data coverage, I guess also the better the knowledge of how the development is in a specific area. Okay, I think I will end my presentation here. And in relation to some of the last things I said about big data and official statistics during COVID-19, but also the use of non-official data like citizen-generated data, I have been trying to at least touch upon a few of the very many, and again, thank you for that, very many questions that were posed ahead of the side event and presentations that you have sent to us. So now I will leave the floor to you. And as I said, please raise your hand if you want to pose a questions or put it in the chat. But I think it would be nice if a few of you will raise your hand and come with an intervention based on the two presentations. So please, the floor is yours. Either for questions, comments, suggestions, reflection.
Gabriel has raised his hand.
Gabriel,
thank you very much, Niels. Thank you, Maciej, also. Very interesting presentation. I like them all. Inspiring, definitely. My question I don't know if we can address it really now during that event, but it is that in general, when we are discussing the use of big data, it is mainly for new statistics or new indicators. Basically, when we do not have the information, we don't have a survey or even an administrative source, and we say, let's try to use big data, geospatial information to get this information. Now, the question is that in a few cases in the future, probably, innovative data sources are going to replace gradually traditional data sources. And for most of the countries, I take Denmark outside there, it would be like survey data. How do you see this migration that is actually a transformation process that is very risky, needed, but risky? How do we support countries to go gradually from 100% survey data sources gradually to a blended or even a 100% big data source? How do you see that? And how could we help the countries in the future in order to process this migration in a smooth and safe way? Thank you very much, Niels.
Thank you.
And Maciej, yeah.
I would try to say just a little bit about it, and others are very welcome also to join the conversation. I think one part of the answer is, of course, that we support that by getting the very good examples, and then to be, as you are indicating in your question, aware of the challenges that we are facing. Just to use our experience with the use of scanner data for the CPI, that is still a, I don't know if fragile is the right word, but the point is that we actually have to have two production systems in a period of time for two purposes. One, to be sure that what we will get of results based on the scanner data part of it is very much in line with what we will get from the traditional collection of data for the CPI. And the other thing is that the fragile part is, of course, that we are in the hands of the data providers in a different way that we are used to, because we get the data from a number of supermarket chains, and they can withdraw that access from one day to the other. And in that case, we will, of course, have a major problem. And if all of them, for some reason, at some point decided to withdraw the access to the data that they're given us, then we have to return to the old system. But I think that's the kind of challenges that we have to face. And I know that as statisticians, we want to be 100% sure in everything we do. But I think maybe that reassurance we have to let go a bit in order to move into the new regime and be more like willing to take on risks in relation to this. And so instead of making this long list of all the problems, maybe we should just make the list also of the possibilities that exists.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Okay, other interventions or questions?
There's a raised hand from Christine.
Okay, Christine, please. Christy.
Hi, yeah. Thanks so much for taking these. Thanks so much for taking these questions. I just want to follow on what was just said about, this kind of huge risk and legality surrounding the kind of data that is provided. It seems like, yeah, geospatial data really does have this enormous, really invitation to wipe out any concerns about legalities, because so much of it is freely available. And it seems as though there are so many excellent use cases with geospatial data having immediate interventions into humanitarian efforts and many, many other indicators above and beyond environmental monitoring. There are so many great use cases there, a lot of them coming from NGOs. So I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit to how maybe those use cases from NGOs could benefit what you're doing, and how those use cases could really be supported to the statistical division to say, hey, this is a valid data source and it has huge effects. I wonder if you could speak to that. Thank you.
One of the things we try to do in the Global Working Group is to create what we call the global platform for big data for official statistics. And the global platform is a digital space where basically everything can be shared. So data can be shared, but also algorithms, best practices, results from projects and stuff like that. So if you haven't, if you haven't visited what we call the marketplace for official statistics in one long word, if you Google, put that into Google, you will get to the global platform. And we need to benefit even more from the facilities that exist in the global platform. That could be a specific. That could be an outset for the collaboration between some of the examples that you mentioned from NGOs and others with these national statistical organizations in order to. I mean, for us, the quest is to transform the project-based results that exist there, and they are many and they are very interesting, into something that can be transformed into the running production of different parts of official statistics. But the global platform is a possibility to meet virtually and maybe develop that. So that at least that's one possibility. So again, if you haven't familiarized yourself with the facilities in a global platform and the possibilities that exist there, so maybe if you do that, we could then take a further conversation based on what has been established there. Okay. Any other comments or questions? If that is not the case, I think we will move on to the next three presentations. And the first is from Gemma Van Helden from UNESCAP. Gemma, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Niels. And I'll just move across to my presentation, which hopefully we can see here. So yeah, good evening, and thank you very much for the opportunity to join you tonight, Niels, and the entire task team. My name is Gemma Van Helden. I'm the Director of the Statistics Division based in Asia and the Pacific, UNESCAP. And today I'm just going to present a bit of work we've been doing here in Asia Pacific on, and try and answer some of the questions that were asked of us tonight, which I've put there as how many countries are using big data sources for the SDG indicators, and coming back to the intention, the 2030 agenda, which was put to us many years ago as being an opportunity for a data revolution. I'm also going to particularly focus on the country experience here. As Niels says, we've all been asked to take a bit of a country focus. So in Asia and the Pacific, which is where I'm based, SDG data availability, it's improving. So over the years, so the number of indicators out of the 230 odd that we now have sufficient data to measure progress has been improving over the years. But as you can see there, we still don't have sufficient data to measure progress on all of the indicators. And there is 129 indicators where we have either no or insufficient data to measure progress as of 2020. And if I look at this by SDG goal, we really have particularly bad data availability challenges where we have insufficient or no data on over 80% of the indicators in Goal 5, gender equality, Goal 11 on sustainable consumption and production, and goal 14, life below water, which is a particular important priority for us here in Asia and the Pacific. So the first research that we did here in SCAP was we undertook some desktop research on how many of the SDG indicators could benefit from one particular type of big data, which is geospatial information. And we had a look at what the experts were saying, the experts in the interagency expert group on SDG working group on geospatial information and the group on Earth observations. And between those two expert groups, 39 indicators of the 231 were identified as benefiting from geospatial information. And based on our desktop research, we found 16 country examples of countries that were compiling these indicators using geospatial information. And you'll see there on the picture that these examples were for goals 1, 2, 6, 9, 11, 14, and 15. But one of the indicators in particular where we have data availability challenges in Asia Pacific was goal 5, and we could not find any examples of using big data for big geospatial data for that example. But we did find 2 more examples. We found country examples for 2 more SDG indicators beyond the indicators which the 2 expert groups had identified where geospatial information was being used to compile the SDG indicators. So this prompted us to ask ourselves a couple of the questions actually that were asked for this side event tonight. So what SDG indicators are countries using big data for? And what about other big data types other than geospatial information? So again, based on and we only did undertake this using some desktop research. And I'm very, very keen to hear from our audience tonight if they've got other examples. And what we've compiled is a bit of a dossier, if you like, of data for the examples. And for each of the goals, we have compiled data that looks a little bit like this. So as we heard from our colleagues from Dennis Marpa, the Chief Statistician of the Philippines, we've compiled for each of the SDG indicators which countries have trialed or are exploring the use of big data sources. And here for goal 1, so you'll see Philippines have used, in this case, it was citizen science generated data for these indicators. We also have found some examples from Beijing in China and from Ukraine. And we've highlighted which ones are from the National Statistics Offices. So for the goals 1 through to 9, which I'm showing on this slide here, you'll see that we've actually got examples from all of these goals, 1 through to 5, 6 through to 9 on the right-hand side, from countries like Philippines, Beijing, China, Ukraine, some in Europe, Canada, Netherlands, Mexico, but a whole range of indicators, SDG indicators, where we could find country examples of countries compiling the SDG indicator using a big data source. And where I've highlighted in bold, these are the National Statistical Offices, and the countries where they're not highlighted in bold, they came from the National Statistical System, not the office. Similarly, if I look at goals 11 through to 17, we have a lot of country examples for goal 11 for sustainable cities and communities, which is great because this is a real data gap in Asia and the Pacific. And for goal 15, life on land, where again, we saw a lot of examples. And these were mainly across 3 different big data sources: geospatial data, citizen science data, and mobile phone data. So this brought us to just a few questions. Again, we're talking to a bit of a statistical audience here. So here's some facts and figures about big data use and the SDG goal and indicators. So let me ask you, how many SDG goals do you think we could find country examples for? Well, we could find 16. So for all of the goals, except for goal 10, we could find country examples of the use of citizen science data, geospatial data, or mobile phone data for compiling the SDG indicator. Now, how many of the SDG indicators could country examples be found for? So the first one was goals. How many indicators? So we found examples from countries for 91 of the 231 SDG indicators. And here we found examples, 25 examples of geospatial data, 4 for mobile phone data, and 79 for citizen science data. But all of these examples were the examples that Dennis just showed you and shared with you from the Philippines. And there was quite a few examples. There were 16 examples where countries were using different data sources for different indicators. So for instance, for one of the indicators, one country might have used geospatial data, another country might have used mobile phone data or citizen science data. Unfortunately, we could find no examples of where this big data use was being used in official documents. All the examples were of an exploratory nature, say in conference papers, research papers, and the like. Now, what about the following facts and figures about big data used by countries? And again, stressing the importance of tonight's event, as Neil shared. So how many examples of big data used from countries for SDG indicators were we found? And here we found 156 examples, which I was really very excited by. And we found 79 for citizen science data, but these again were all from the Philippines. 4 were from mobile phone data, all from Indonesia, and 73 examples of the use of geospatial data from 22 countries, as I showed you on the earlier slide. How many of these examples, though, were from national statistics offices? 103. So, but if I exclude the citizen science data examples from the Philippines, 24 were from national statistics offices. So really only 24 examples from NSOs from these 156 that I could find, 79 with citizen science, 4 with mobile phone, and 22 with geospatial. And which indicator do you think had the highest number of examples? Here, it was not unsurprising, 15.1.1, we found 11 examples, but only 2 of these came from national statistical offices. And in terms of the SDG indicator that the highest number of examples from national statistical offices, it was in goal 1, no poverty, of 1.3.1, with 7 country examples from national statistical offices. So based on this desktop research, we do think that SDG data availability, it certainly remains a challenge for us in Asia and the Pacific, despite, as you saw, incremental improvements every year over the last 4 years. Countries are definitely embracing the opportunity to use big data for the indicators, mainly for geospatial data, which I think is extremely exciting. 22 country examples could be found. We have seen that demonstrated the potential for citizen science data, and it's really, I'm very, very happy to be following Dennis Marpa from the Philippines, who shared with you the examples there. But we also have several national stats officers, such as the Republic of Korea, China, and Indonesia, who have provided dedicated efforts to explore the use of big data for the SDGs. I think our opportunity here today, and the opportunity that we have as a statistical community, is to turn these opportunities into new norms. So how do we innovate using the big data sources for indicators in products such as national, voluntary national review reports? And how do we use national SDG data availability to drive partnerships within the broader national statistical system? As I showed you there, many of these examples were from the system, not from the statistical office. So how do we drive those partnerships across the system, particularly with geospatial science and environmental agencies and academies? And very happy to say that help is available, as we heard, the Global Working Group on Big Data for Official Statistics, the Global Platform, the regional hubs that have now been established across the system. They're an excellent source of good practice, knowledge, tools, and more. We also have national level partners. These 156 examples from countries are available where we can reach out to our national partners and development partners such as SCAP, UN Statistics Division, Global Pulse Labs, Paris 21, Asian Development Bank. We're all here to help. A lot of this information here in Asia and the Pacific is available on our SDG Gateway, which is a gateway to not only the SDG data that's collected from each of you from the countries through the SDG process, but also tools that are available to help you assess of data availability. And finally, I'd just like to highlight that the information available in this presentation I've shared tonight are in these two papers, which I'm sharing on the right-hand side, a working paper series on big data for the SDGs and a specific paper on geospatial for the SDGs. And in these two documents, we've not only presented each of these country examples, but we've included in those documents a hyperlink, a link to each of those examples if you want to explore a bit more of the detail a bit more of the information in more detail. So thank you very much, Niels. Back to you.
Thank you, Gemma, so much. This was really interesting and very specific, very nice. The next presentation is Stephen McFelly from UNCTAD. So Stephen, the floor is yours.
Hello, everybody. Greetings from Geneva. So good afternoon, good morning, good night, whatever time it is. So I had a lovely presentation prepared, which I'm going to load up now. But in fact, I had a last minute change of thought. I started reading all of the lovely questions that were sent in, and when I read them, I thought, you know, I'm gonna ditch my presentation, and I'm going to address these questions directly, because I just thought they were really interesting. So there's a slight change to the advertised title, really. Because I'm answering questions, what I'm going to say is these are personal reflections. The views don't reflect either the Big Data Working Group or UNCTAD or anybody else. This is just my own views, just in case anybody's upset. So the first question was, what is the role of unofficial data statistics in compiling statistics and SDGs? And I guess obviously the first question or the first answer is it depends. It depends on the countries. It depends what we mean by big data. As we heard in Denmark, administrative data isn't even considered non-traditional, that they're so used to it. But I guess the first point I wanted to make really is that a lot of people focus on the data, but you also need to think about the infrastructure that needs to be in place to use administrative data or big data. So that, like, for example, the data need to be digitized if you're really going to use them. And I think Niels already mentioned the importance of unique identifiers. So these type of things are central, as is statistical legislation. And increasingly with new data sources, we also see the importance of data protection commissioners and their roles in our life. Certainly from a European perspective, we see quite different or inconsistent interpretations of DPC legislation across the member states. And they're the sort of issues that will need to be addressed. Two questions, though, when I was trying to answer this question, two questions sprung to mind. One is, how willing are NSOs to use new data sources, and how capable are they? But also, how willing are countries to allow international organizations to use non-traditional data sources to calculate global estimates? Or what about regional estimates or national estimates? So these are big challenges for countries because there's a political dimension. And I think, of course, the underlying issue all the time is the quality. How do NSOs ensure that there's good stable data, good quality arising from these? So I'll talk, and you can read the questions as I talk. But I'm really glad somebody asked this question. So this is really about citizen science, and we've heard a few people mention it already in the introductions. I think with any new relationship, you have to get to know each other. And certainly from a citizen science point of view, the fact that they're putting a global governance structure in place, I think is really, really helpful. Because a crucial thing from a UN perspective is that the UN architecture is built around member states. And if you've been following the data debates at the Statistical Commission over the years, you will know there's an underlying tension around the use of unofficial data either for imputation, for compilation of SDG indicators, or for just country estimates generally. And of course, citizen science don't necessarily represent the views of member states. So the architecture between citizen science and the UN isn't properly aligned. But this is the data world that we live in now. So I think citizen science and citizen generated data need to become important elements of the data revolution. So we can't ignore them. So we have to figure out how to incorporate these data. And for that reason, myself and a colleague published a paper about 2 years ago on how we might make unofficial or non-traditional data sources traditional. And I've put the reference at the end of the presentation. So the next questions then is really about, can we use the data to improve consistency across countries? And I think this is a really super interesting point, because traditionally, and to date, we're still looking at all of the compilation from a national data perspective. But of course, one of the big issues in the new data world is the big question around data sovereignty. Who owns the data and who controls it? But also, I would argue that data itself, just like the economies, are globalizing. And while that you can see that as a threat, or you can see it as an opportunity. And one of the opportunities it does do is it allows us to rethink who does the compilation for global estimates, or even national estimates for some indicators. So traditionally, what we've thought about, okay, we all access the global data, the satellite information, Facebook information, whatever it is, and we do our own things individually at national level. You could flip that argument on its head and say, well, we could access global data once, compile the data for the different countries, and then give it to the countries. Now, of course, statistically, that's feasible, but politically, that raises all sorts of issues. But these are the types of issues I think that we will need to confront as we go forward, and we really start thinking seriously about using non-traditional data sources. A couple of countries here, or a couple of questions here that I've bundled together because I think they all kind of overlap, but very, very interesting questions. So there is a fundamental principles for official statistics, and that's endorsed by the UN General Assembly. But they apply to official statistics. So they're sound principles. They make, I would argue that they make sense for any statistics really. But in theory, the scope is official statistics. But when I look at what's happening around the world, I'm beginning to think that we need to move the idea in countries from national statistical systems to national data and statistical systems. Now, arguably in the Nordic countries, they've already done this in effect. They just haven't called it that. But I think for a lot of other countries, countries need to think more seriously about the legislation and the principles and the coordination that are hand in hand in using administrative data, but now in other non-traditional data sources. And I think too, the other issue that's now emerging is the balance between data as a global public good or a national public good, and as a commercial asset. And there's clearly a tension emerging there, and it's not clear how to balance these. So because of all of these issues, the chief statisticians of the international system, which is called the CCSA, of which myself and Gemma are members, we have argued in the forthcoming World Development Report that will come out by the World Bank at the end of the month, that maybe it's time to consider a global data charter or a global data convention, which would address things like a fundamental principles for all data, not just big data. But it would be a very different convention to any previously, because usually conventions are between states. But now when we look at the data environments that are evolving, this would have to be a convention that includes states, but also civil society, also private sector. So it would be a much more complex type of convention. But arguably, there's a need now to kind of reach some sort of global consensus on data sharing, on data privacy, data reuse, data ownership. And these are all part of the discussion. Just as a concluding remark, I think the the challenges we're seeing around confidentiality, I think this is a huge issue for using geospatial or big data. And it's becoming increasingly difficult to have, because fundamentally at the heart, the issue around confidentiality or privacy is striking a balance between the individual and the community. So that between common good and individual good. And I think that, unfortunately, that discussion seems to be harder to have as time goes on. But it's a very, very important discussion in our world. So just very quickly, this is from a paper I published about 2 years ago. It actually feels in my head, I was surprised when I looked at the date when I was putting together the slides. I felt like I wrote it about 5 years ago. But I guess with COVID and the data world, things have changed so much. But on the left-hand side, what I was looking at here is the data sources. And this is from the UN Big Data Inventory. So I guess things have changed a bit. But nevertheless, I think the underlying results are interesting. And you can see the main kind of data sources that people were looking at were web scraping, scanner data, mobile phone, CDR records, and social media, satellite imagery a bit less. And then other stuff, which I think is probably getting a bit more important now, like smart meter and stuff, wasn't so important at the time. And then when you look at what they were doing, and I think this kind of answers a bit, it speaks a bit to Gabriel's question. The main focus of what people were looking at were actually quite traditional statistics. They were price statistics, they were tourism and transport statistics, population migration statistics. So they weren't necessarily the cutting edge of official statistics. They were quite traditional sources. What you also see, though, is in both columns, both in the project and in the data source, there was a large chunk of projects that are categorized as other. That was a generous interpretation by me. These projects, I think I would call them aspirational at best. And I think this has been one of the problems historically with big data, is they became kind of trophy projects. A lot of NSOs or a lot of people felt they had to have a big data project to be considered modern. But really and truly, when you read the specifications, that they're not very credible projects. And I think we've hopefully moved on from that now, because I think that's just undermining the work we're trying to do. Looking then, coming back to citizen science, this is taken, I've stolen this from a paper by Dilek Frazel and colleagues on mapping citizen science contributions to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And this shows two things. The green cells show where citizen science is actually contributing already to the SDG indicators. And then the orange is their assessment of where they think citizen science could contribute if allowed. And it's a very extensive contribution, as you can see. So I think, you know, when a lot of people doubt that this stuff can really contribute, I think these statistics talk to that. So just to wrap up, what I'd like to do now is quickly talk about a couple of examples that I'm more familiar with. This is stuff that we're working on. So in UNCTAD, we use a lot of data sources to nowcast both merchandise and services trade statistics. And the reason I'm showing this is because in order to nowcast, by definition, you have to use non-traditional data sources. It is absolutely impossible to build a nowcasting model, especially if you're using anything like dynamic factor analysis, without relying on new types of data. It's just impossible. If you're relying on traditional data sources only, you wouldn't be able to nowcast. And this is very important because politically now we have this new initiative, the Data for Now, where right up to the top levels of the UN, they're pushing for timely data in the SDGs. We also use AIS information, which is the maritime data. Now, we take all of these millions and millions of records and we distill them into a couple of small indicators. And that might seem a waste, but actually, from our point of view, it's really useful because what it's allowed us to do is look at port performance and port connectivity. So it's a marriage of geospatial information and the turnover of ships and how quickly they turn over. And that's allowing us to develop proxies on the efficiency of ports which is really, really useful from our point of view. And then on goals, on indicator 12.6.1 on sustainability reporting, we're using an AI approach with the help of a global algorithmic institute, where we're basically web scraping vast amounts of corporate reporting to see how many are reporting on sustainability issues and how many aren't. So just one final thought to conclude, because it came up a few places. There was quite a lot of questions around health. Now, I'm not a health expert, but it does strike me in the discussion around beyond GDP, there's been a lot of emphasis on the importance of it kind of moving beyond economy and looking at society and environment. But I think this year has really shown the importance of health as well. And I think for the macro economic people, they may need to rethink kind of the society piece, because I'm not sure we're really capturing the importance of health and public health in particular in our metrics around beyond GDP. If you're interested, there's some further discussion outlined in these papers where I've dealt with some of these issues in more detail. And with that, I'll conclude. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Stephen. A number of super important issues for us to deal with. So let's try to do that in the discussion. Now, the last but not least, Oliver Dupre from the World Bank. So Oliver, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Niels. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, very good. So good morning, afternoon, evening, everyone. My name is Olivier Duprier, and I'm a senior advisor in the World Bank Data Group based in Washington, DC. This presentation will focus on low-income countries. Obviously, the World Bank is more interested in the countries that face the main issues on poverty, inequality, shared prosperity. So the focus of what I'm going to say is really very much low-income countries. We were a few years ago promised a data revolution. I think it has been made very clear from the presentations before, Gemma and others, that this data revolution is actually a very slow, long, complex process of modernization, especially for statistical agencies in low-income countries that face quite a few challenges, even with the traditional data collection. And part of the reason is that the use of big data requires a lot of conditions to be met before they can be integrated in a official data production system. They need to be obviously affordable, which is not always an easy issue to solve. Compute, storage, and others is quite expensive. And then the solutions need to be doable, sustainable, safe, legal, ethical. I think all these different dimensions have been mentioned in the previous presentations. I'm not going to go in detail of that. So basically what that means, and this will be a key message of the World Development Reports that will come in very, very soon on data. What is really needed is a more enabling environment for statistical agencies in low-income countries and in general. And this enabling environment is an environment that needs to provide them with easier access to the data, which requires solving legal issues, but also problems of trust. The private sector will not share data with you if they don't trust that you will use that in a way that will not harm their own reputation. We have procurement issues, and we have obviously in low and middle income countries the problem of capacity, infrastructure, funding, and others. In previous presentation, the issue of privacy protection was also mentioned. We need to have a system of safeguards to ensure that these innovative ways of producing data and using data are really safe, that we protect both the citizens and the producers or the owners of data against misuse and abuse of data, which can be accidental or intentional. So safeguards is a very important component of an ecosystem that would foster the use of big data. Now, one thing I want to make very clear is that we have to give a lot of credit to statistical agencies in low-income countries. Even when they don't themselves use big data in the production process, they contribute a lot to these sometimes experimental or innovative big data use that have been mentioned. The data set from NSOs, and I'm mostly referring to household surveys, population census, are absolutely critical to train models, to calibrate models, to validate models. The presentation from the Philippines made it very clear. When they producing poverty estimates based on night lights, this requires data from the Family Income Expenditure Survey. When they mention the road access, they mention the DHS survey. When they mention the use of remote sensing for agricultural data, it also requires some ground truthing, meaning some surveys in the field. The problem now, obviously, is that a lot of these data sets that are input to the use of big data come with low frequency. We don't have enough surveys, sometimes problem of access, and a problem of fitness for purpose. So I would argue that promoting the use of big data means that we need more and better traditional data, not less. I don't see, certainly not in low-income countries, big data replacing anytime soon the traditional data source. Now, we need to solve this problem of frequency, access, and fitness for purpose. And for that, NSO need to really change a little bit the culture, the culture, both in terms of production of data and disseminating of data. When I'm talking about production of data, I think when you design a survey or census, you should really think of how this data source can augment the other data source, including the non-traditional data source that users may want to use. And let me give you a very, very simple example. 4 or 5 years ago, I made an evaluation of 650 household survey questionnaires that collected data on ownership of a cell phone. Out of these 650, only 39 collected this information at the individual level. For in every other question, it was just, well, does anyone in the household own a cell phone? So if we really want to use CDR data, to measure mobility or to do all kind of analysis, including poverty prediction, I think it would be very useful to know exactly who owns a phone, or even more important, who doesn't own a phone. And this would only require very simple adaptation to traditional data collection. Disseminating of microdata is also very important, responsible data dissemination. A lot of NSOs are still not sharing enough data to really promote the use of big data by external contributors. Now, what the international community can contribute to solve that is keep providing proper data documentation, cataloging, data protection, data dissemination solutions, including tools that would modernize data dissemination. I think dissemination of data via API should be a must, in the near future. Now, talking about NSOs as users of big data, we mentioned that they're facing a lot of constraints, legal, technical, financial, and others. One thing that the international community can do, and that's probably part of what the working group wants or intends to solve, is to make it easier for NSOs and others to make use of these big data. I think the focus should be at this stage on solutions that can be easily or relatively easily scaled, that are safe and that are sustainable. This is probably the reason why geospatial data will be the focus of much of this work. And the way we can help NSOs as users of big data is by providing open and analysis-ready data. I think we all know that any data scientist would have to spend 70–80% of their time acquiring, finding, preparing data before they can really do the analysis. We can solve that to some extent by packaging the data in a way that they would be free, properly formatted, documented, protected, and ready to be analyzed, meaning provided with proper tools and tutorials. It's one thing also to produce a lot of these products and services. I think it's very important to produce a better inventory and to better document all these resources. I don't think we're doing a very good job at cataloging and documenting these solutions. And obviously, we need to provide training programs, and not just on-the-job training programs, but also look at the curriculum of data science and statistical institutes. Now, I just want to give a very quick example of what it means to provide analysis-ready open data. This is something that the World Bank has just launched now. It is a data set that can be used for monitoring SDG 7, the sustainable, reliable, and affordable energy for all. The data set basically, it is a packaged data set that contains night light data for every night since 1992. So it's 28 years of daily night light data, which have been harmonized to be consistent over time. So the data have not been produced by the bank, they come from satellite imagery, but they have been packaged, organized, documented, and formatted in such a way that they are consistent and easy to use. They're also provided with a tutorial in Python in this case, all that's available in GitHub. Now, this also comes with a tool, which is a tool for assessing access, reliability, and use of electricity at a very disaggregated level, geographically disaggregated level, which combines nightlight data and high resolution population density data from Facebook. This was produced by the University of Michigan. The partnership with academia, I think, is critical in the use of big data by NSOs. And these data have been validated on many countries. So basically what you get from that is very high resolution information on access at the settlement level. You have information also on the regularity of availability of electricity, which is obviously very, very important. It's not enough just to have a binary variable that tells you whether an area has or doesn't have electricity. You need to know whether they have it around the clock. And this can be used for then identifying unmet needs at a very disaggregated level. Now, once you have that, you have basically the indicators you need, other type of data, other models in the same approach of open data and free model can be used by the people who will have to take action. They can link that to data on, the solar potential, the wind potential, and others, the location of the grids, mini grids in countries to estimate what it would take then to provide electricity to all in a country. And I'm stopping here. Thanks, Niels.
Oliver, thank you very much. Very interesting, both in the kind of the more general part, but also in the example at the end of the presentation. So now the floor is open for comments and questions. I was actually wondering if the Director General from the Philippines would like to take the floor, both because there might be some of the questions that are out there that you would like to maybe address, but also because Philippines were mentioned many times as an example of the use of new data sources. So if you have any comments or approaches to answering the questions, please, the floor is yours. Okay, if not, the floor is then open for everybody else to come with questions or reflections in relation to the presentations from Jim, Stephen, and Oliver. So please raise your hand and Lorenzo.
Good afternoon. I was very happy with the presentations, and just the last one regarding the night lights. So I understand that the platform is putting together population grid data with night lights from time series, I guess from Landsat, maybe, I'm not sure. I just was wondering how to access the platform, and if the data set that comes from this analysis can be used within SDG monitoring, if there has already been some thoughts on how to make those statistics useful for any SDG indicator. Thank you.
Okay, you want me to respond?
Yes, please. Yes, Oliver, please.
Okay, so the link to the platform will be found in the presentation, and I understand that the presentations will be shared. So everything's on GitHub, basically, not except the data. The data are on AWS. This represents 250 terabytes of data. So, I mean, obviously not everyone will need the full data set. So the data set have been formatted and organized in such a way that you can really easily query the data to have the information only on the area you need and only for the time you need. So that's I mean, the data will be on AWS, openly accessible, and the Python scripts and others will be found on GitHub as well. This is a global data set. It has been used, and I mean, there are papers by the University of Michigan where they have shown how they actually measure this, the access and use of, to electricity. What basically you have to do, and they have produced indicators for, I think, 50 countries that was done for the period until 2017. They have produced these indicators here again for 50 countries. The objective, of course, is to continue and maintain these. These are data that come from different satellites, and that will still be available. We can expect this data to still be available in all the way to 2030. What users would have to do would be to add to these data the layers of, for example, the boundary files of the own administrative area. These are data set that we don't necessarily always easily find for all countries. So I think the production of work to do really the generation of estimate for small area estimates, administrative estimates, would be better done at the country level, based on the official boundary files, boundary maps that the countries could add to this nightlight data.
Thank you very much.
And the data set contains, the model from the University of Michigan is all done in R. The tutorial that has been developed by the World Bank is our Python notebooks. It's all completely based on open source applications.
If I just may take advantage
Yes, please.
As you mentioned, the issue of sustainability. Now, we appreciate that aspect very much. When we work with national statistics offices, for instance, and we want to build capacity in the use of Earth observation for crop type mapping and production of yield statistics or acreage statistics, then when we have to deal with the required architecture, the infrastructure, which it can be Amazon-based or Google-based, then we start to incur into costs. And often those costs can be very high, especially if the volume is high, or if, let's say, the various components are not really optimized. And I was wondering, how did you approach basically the hosting and the processing of 250 terabytes, I understand. I mean, and how does this impact on the costs? I mean, every time the user wants to analyze the data using the infrastructure and eventually download the results, does this incur into extra costs for the running of this project? And how did you basically manage to solve this issue? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Oliver, please.
Yeah, I mean, the data are open. They store on Amazon. There's no issue of costing of the storage. The main issue will be the issue of compute for organizations who may want to use that. Again, no one will use 250 terabytes. And you're not going to use every nightlight data for every day in the past 20 years for running your estimates. You will really have to focus on just what you need. But the compute, the price of compute is probably the most challenging issue. So at the World Bank, we often shocked by the cost of running some of the data analysis. We're doing some exploratory work on some of the big data, not just these data on Nightlight, but it can be on data that text data we use for natural language processing, or CDR data. Sometimes for fitting a model, it can cost us $60,000–$70,000. The cloud compute is extremely expensive, and if you're not extremely careful the way you do that, you have a problem. So this platform, I showed, does not provide you with the free compute. That's an issue that also needs to be addressed. Some organizations at the World Bank, we get some of the major cloud computing organizations, AWS and others, providing us with a free credit for supporting some of this work. on big data for development. But this is indeed one of the obstacles that some countries will have to solve the cost of compute.
Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments?
Niels, Philippines would like to address questions from Unitar.
Philippines, please, the floor is yours.
Hello. So Unitar had posted this question about what are some possible indicators that were generated from the CGD. So just to cite two examples, we had for SDG 12.6.1, the number of companies publishing sustainability reports, which can possibly be provided by the Philippine Business for the Environment. So this is considered, for this indicator, this is a tier 3 in our country. And for SDG 5.2.2, the proportion of women and girls age 15 years and older subjected to sexual violence by persons other than an intimate partner in the previous 12 months by age and place of occurrence. So these are just two examples, and then for other examples, we invite you to visit the published report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The last question or comment? Gemma, Stephen, would you like to say something here in the closing?
I don't. Sorry, Gemma. Go ahead.
No, you go, Neil. You go, Steve.
No, I didn't have anything to add. I thought I think there's an interesting kind of coherence across all the presentations, which is always a relief. So I don't think there's any major disagreements. And just thanks to everybody who posted the questions in advance. I thought they were very interesting. Thanks.
Thank you. Gemma?
Yeah, Niels, thanks very much. So I just wanted to share that even though we did find a few examples, well, really no examples of from countries of the use of big data for SDG indicators in official documents, I am aware of a few countries that are very close to using big data sources in their official documents, like voluntary national review reports that are due this year. So I think we are at an exciting time, and I'd really encourage us to keep the conversation going, because I think even though at this point in time we may not be able to share any official examples, I think we will see an increasing number of examples from countries of using big data, like mobile phone data, for a few of the SDG indicators, particularly around tourism and some of the mobility indicators. And I think we will have good news stories in the not too distant future, certainly from our region. Thank you very much, Niels.
Thank you, Gemma. Oliver, any last comments?
Just in 5 seconds. I'm a very big fan of metadata and reproducibility of analytics. That's basically what I spend most of my time on at the World Bank, improving data discoverability and reproducibility of all the research we're working on. And I think that the statistics community has some fantastic tools for the traditional type of data. We can document geospatial data with an ISO standard. We can document survey data and census with a DDI standard. There are all kind of metadata standards for traditional data. We don't really have the equivalent that would allow us to optimally document big data and big data use and analytics. So I hope this is something that the working group on big data could look at, taking inspiration from the good practice in metadata and reproducibility in other types of analysis.
Thank you very much.
There's hand raised, or there was.
There was, or is somebody raised a hand, please?
Okay, it's gone now.
It's gone. Okay, but we are also approaching the end of the of this side event. So again, thank you very much to all the presenters and also to the participants. We were close to 200 when we were most people. I think that's really nice in very many ways. I think one could say that big data is also a big potential, and I think that the presentations showed that, and actually in kind of a short time, like 5 or 6 years, we actually come a long way already. I remember when we created the Global Working Group on Big Data for Official Statistics, it was a part of the inspiration was that those new data sources might kind of be something that others would go for and not the NSOs. But I think the discussion we have had here today show that there's already a lot of experience, both in relation to the SDGs, but also more generally in relation to official statistics, and that we should work further on that. I kind of like Steve's idea about a national statistics and data system. National meaning that some of the very good virtues of official statistics that I also think Oliver were pointing to in relation to metadata and others should be covered also in relation to the national data system, even access for everybody, well-documented data and stuff like that. So there's a lot to work on. We are moving slowly forward. Sometimes I think maybe too slow, but again, I think that the presentations and discussion here today shows the big potential and also the ability to move forward in relation to the goals that we want to achieve, both in relation to the SDGs and more generally in relation to the official statistics. As I said in my introduction, we will take the issues that has been raised in the questions that you so generously put forward to us in advance as an input to the future work of the task team on big data for the SDGs. And again, please visit the website of the Global Working Group, and once again trying to encourage you also to take active part in the work of the different task teams of the Global Working Group, including this one on big data and the SDGs. So thank you so very much for participating, and enjoy the rest of your morning, day, or evening. See you soon somewhere. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, bye.